Hey everyone, Christine here from Portable Entrepreneur. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I am really excited about this because today we kick off day one of a week-long series where we're going to be meeting here every day, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, to talk all about website assets as an investment class. So today we're going to specifically be talking about what website assets are, what this can do for you, really making sure that you have a foundation for this that you can build on. And then each day we're going to be getting into a different aspect of these income producing websites. So tomorrow is a very important one. We're going to be talking about how to determine which path is actually right for you specifically. And this is where it sounds really general, something very basic, but this is something that is absolutely incredibly important. In fact, I think this is one of the most important things that we'll talk about here, because this is where I want you to be able to put your blinders on, to shut out what everyone else is telling you that you should do or that you need to do, and exploring all these different options that exist that could be great for everyone else, but not necessarily for you. And I want you to understand what it is that you have, you don't have, what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like, what you hate, where you are now, where you want to be. That is different for every person. So that doesn't mean that every path can then be the same for every person. So this is really about you, what it is that you want, what it is that you don't want, so that you're happy at the end of this. Because this, for me, is really about quality of life. This is not where I want to show you how to work 15 hours a day so you can make millions and millions and actually hate your life because you have no time for fun or anything actually in it. This is really a fine balance of being able to understand what's fun for you, what's your ideal lifestyle, and then creating the type of work that allows you to do that. It pays for that for you. This doesn't mean that this is some get-rich-quick scheme or this is something that you can just throw up in a weekend and oh, now you have thousands rolling in. This is something you do have to put some time and effort into, but we want to do this in a way that is intentional. So we understand that we want an income-producing website, whether this is something we build, this is something that we acquire, that's going to pay for our rent, our car, our vacation, or whatever it is that we set out to do. So that is why we really want to get more into this, but do it in a way that it actually is realistic for you. And it's a way that whether you're doing this right now and you're working on this in a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, you're going to be really happy with what you have done in that time frame. And I'm going to talk about time frames here in just a second. But after that, we're going to be also talking about numbers. I love to talk about numbers because if we don't talk about numbers, we don't understand what's possible. We don't understand not just what's possible, but what we actually have to do to get where we actually want to be. So we're going to be talking about sales prices here. Now, this could be that you would like to acquire a website asset that already is bringing in revenue for you. You absolutely can do that. But if you're like, well, I have no budget from that, I'm starting from zero, that's fine. Or maybe you just don't want to. That's perfectly fine. You can build these. And whether you decide to sell this in the future, you hold this for the rest of forever, it's fine. I want you to really understand the value of what you have. Because if you think about this from a client's perspective, if you are building a website for a client, you're really essentially building them a business asset, because that asset, that website, should be creating revenue and putting money back into their pockets. But this time, you're doing this for yourself. And so that's why we really need to make sure that we're looking at what we do online. Well, it's an asset. It has value, and it can become more and more valuable over time. And I also want to talk here about a 2 to 5 year financial freedom plan, because these website assets, they can do so much for your life, and it doesn't have to be in a very extended period of time. Again, not a get-rich-quick scheme here, not, oh, in 3 months, oh, this is going to be amazing, everything's going to be done for you. But this is something that, again, when you have that intention behind it, you put then time frames behind it, you put specific numbers on it, well, then now we can really talk and we can really make something happen in this time frame. I really also like putting time frames on these types of scenarios because this is also what keeps us from making short-term decisions, because whatever we do in the short term is absolutely going to impact our outcomes in the long term. And again, long term doesn't have to be long. It could be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So that way, when we look back, we're not like, oh, I wish I had done this differently and I wasn't worried about that month or that next month, but I was worried about what that is doing for me now that we're 2 years out, 3 years out, 5 years out. So it really helps us to make different decisions so we can decide where we want to be, just not right now in 6 months, a year, but what is this going to do for us even in 3 years, 5 years from now? So we're going to look at how we can create that kind of plan. But I also want to be able to answer your questions. So anytime that you have a question, or if later hours after watching this, you come back and you're like, oh, I thought of a question, just pop it in the comments. I will do my best and go through and answer all of the questions. Even if I don't get to your question that same day, I may be answering that question later in the week. So definitely stay tuned for that. So this is a really good time to make sure that you subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Normally I don't ask you to do that, but I'll do that this week because that way you can make sure that you're notified as soon as the premiere goes live every single day. But you can also just put that on your calendar so you can join me and ask any questions there. Now we hear more and more about these digital assets. And so we tend to think of things like cryptocurrencies and things like that. But really, I want to make sure that we're expanding digital assets into other type of assets like website assets, whether this is an affiliate-based site, a content site, a marketplace, an e-commerce store, a community. All of these are website assets. We also have ebooks and courses and different kinds of products, newsletters. All of these can be turned into a form of a digital asset. And so that's what we're going to be exploring more of here, because all of these and so much more than that, again, there's so many possibilities, but it's about narrowing down the path for you specifically so that this is something that works for you and not just something that sounds good. But speaking of just sounding good, the idea of owning an income producing website is something that appeals to, well, pretty much anyone. I can talk to my grandma about this and she's like, well, that sounds amazing. I can talk to people that I know who know nothing about web design or the online space at all, and they all think it sounds amazing. It's something that they would love to have. But there's a much smaller portion of people who are then willing to stop and say, okay, well, let's actually create a plan and let's see how we can start implementing that plan to actually make that happen. Because no matter how few skills you think that you have, no matter how many skills you actually do have, no matter if you have $0 for this or you have $100,000 for this, no matter what ideas you have, there is a possibility here for you. So this is about creating that plan and then just getting started on this plan, because really no one knows what they're doing when they get started. So that's why we're putting all of this together here. So we're not going to be looking at this as an expense. We're going to be looking at this as if we're talking to a client. If we're talking to a client and we are selling them on a website, well, essentially we are selling them a business asset. Why? Because that website we're building them should be bringing money into their business. It should be bringing in leads. It should be getting them customers. That all puts money in their pocket. And that's the same thing that we're doing here, except now we're doing it for ourselves instead of necessarily always just doing it for someone else. So that's why these website assets are really investments. Now, obviously, the more views, the more subscribers, users, customers that a website has, the more valuable it's going to be. But even with just a few visitors or a few users, you are setting yourself up to be able to make money and be able to provide value even to those few people. And that is just your starting place. So let's talk about why you want to do this. And that way you can really make sure that this is something that is going to make sense for you. Now, these website assets, these are websites that actually increase in value over time. So if you think about other investments like real estate, for instance, you have houses, hopefully those are going to appreciate and become more valuable over time. We've certainly seen in history that it can go the other way as well. Same thing with the stock market. We all want it to be able to go up, but it doesn't always do that. It can go in the other direction. Websites, same thing. Of course, if you are not maintaining the website, improving the website, then your website can also turn around and go in the other direction where it is not as profitable for you. But really, you have much more control of this asset than you do of other investment classes. So for me, I've tried other investment classes. I've owned homes, I've rented them out, and seen that we do have a lot of control. We can pick the area that we purchase the house, and we can choose to purchase there knowing that we're purchasing for a particular price. We know the rent that we're going to get back. We know how much of that is going to be profit. We know how much money approximately we might have to put in. We don't always have control of the amount of expenses that we are having to pay in when it comes to real estate. We don't always have control of what the market is going to do, if it's going to go up or down, and if our value is going to increase. And sometimes, even though it increases substantially, we may have to wait a much longer time for that as compared to with a website. Same thing with the stock market. I invest in the stock market, but it also doesn't allow me to have control of the price. That certainly would be nice, but I don't have control of what that price is going to be. I don't have the ability to time the market just like no one else does. I have control of how I invest in the stock market and the different strategies that I use to try to increase the amount of ROI that I receive back each year from that. But there are still things that are not within my control there. So with a website, what I like is I have an idea of what the expenses are going to be. I'm not really going to have all these surprise expenses. And I also have a lot more control over what I will and will not do with a website. So I can understand that while maybe the website is making $500 a month, maybe that website is now making $2,000 or beyond at the end of the year. Where if you are getting rent from a tenant, let's say, well, your rent is going to be consistent throughout the year. So that is where you also do have a lot more control with these website assets. Now, another thing you can do is, again, your choice, but you can have a portfolio of websites. So you can choose to have one website asset and you really go all in with that. Or you can look at this as a way that you want to diversify your income a bit. And instead of having all of your income from one website, maybe you have multiple websites within your portfolio that you're pulling income from each. So that way, if one goes up or another one goes down, well, it all starts to balance out. And if you ever have trouble with one, you're able to work on that, knowing that the income is still coming in from these other websites. Again, this is about painting the picture of what you want your life to look like, how much work you want to put into all of this. You can also choose, and this can change and probably will over time, whether you want to handle the website or websites yourself or if you want someone else to do it for you. So I have done a mix of really all of these. One where I have completely taken control of the whole website. I built the website, I promoted the website, I put everything together that the website needed, and I worked on that website. No help outside of that. I have also taken websites and I've done about 50% of the work. So this is whether it's producing content or working on advertising or growth plans. And I've had an assistant who has then taken what I've given and handled everything else. So that can be a really nice mix as well. But I've also done the other where, for instance, right now I have a website asset that I literally spend 10 minutes per week on. Really? Because I have someone else who completely manages the entire rest of the process for me. The rest of that time, in a few minutes every single week, that's just where I'm going to review the analytics that have been provided to me that I have requested to be in my inbox every week, and also just double checking everything is running as I expect. Now, here and there, I do spend more time on it because I'm actually going to look at a growth plan, making sure that we're implementing some of these growth strategies. So we're not just maintaining our levels, but we're actually continuing to grow the site. But then I pass that off to be implemented by the actual site manager. So there's different ways to manage it. And again, it's understanding what it is that you want, but we'll get more into that. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't have all the time in the world, you don't always have to manage all of these sites yourself. And whether you build or acquire, you can always do a mix of these different strategies. But most importantly, this gives you additional income, and this becomes income that you can start to rely on. So it's wonderful when you have a site that starts producing this consistent income, and you can say, well, now this income is what specifically pays for my mortgage or for my rent. This income now here that's coming in, this is specifically what pays for my car. I've talked about this here on the channel before, and we've broken down a budget and looked at how these numbers actually look. But if you think about the past year, think about 2020, 2021, if we learn nothing else, it is that we have to start becoming more reliant on income that we can produce ourselves, income that we have control over creating. Because if we work for someone else and we have no other income and that's taken from us, we're in a really rough spot. So being able to have something that we can fall back on is so incredibly important, and especially moving forward in the future, not knowing what could happen at any time. It is just really a big relief of stress knowing that we have a lot more control over our own income. So I really want to encourage you to start looking at websites as assets. Look at these as an investment. No longer looking at these as just something I do online or something that is an expense, but something that can truly be an asset for your life and how you're able to use this to start making you money, because there's more work at the beginning, but the more you continue to do this, we have this just snowball effect where the momentum just builds and builds and builds. It gets faster and faster and easier. And that's what we want to start. We want to start that momentum today. So just as with any investment class, typically the first thing that you're going to do is look at the ROI, right? What am I going to get back? If I invest this money in, what am I getting back? So let's look at an example of this. Now, again, remember, this is just an example. I'm just making numbers up here. If you have $0 or you have $1 million, fantastic, because you can still do something with this. So don't be worried about the numbers if you don't have the numbers that match this example here. So let's just say we are going to acquire a website asset and it costs $100,000. And for that $100,000 investment, that makes us $3,000 in revenue per month or $36,000 per year. That means we have a 36% return on our investment in 1 year. So think about that, a 36% return in 1 year. So think about the other investment classes and where you're able to produce that kind of return. And this is assuming that you never improve the website. You just maintain as is. You don't change a thing to try to improve it at all. So let's now say that you're able to increase the revenue from $3,000 to $4,000 per month. Well, now you're making $48,000 per year from this $100,000 investment. You're now making nearly 50% return in a single year. Again, assuming you don't then improve it the next year or the year after that. So you see how quickly you get your return on investment with asset classes like this. So this is something why I really want you to think about this, because this gets to be the point where you start to make a higher return on your money. This starts to be where your money can really work for you. This can be where you can start to bring in others to be able to manage some of these processes for you. And there are certainly websites that are much more time intensive to be able to run, and there's some that are quick and easy to be able to run as well. Now, even if we shave these numbers down and you acquire a website for $20,000, it is bringing you in $600 per month in revenue or $7,200 per year. That also is a 36% return on your money. So just something to think about when it comes to this as an investment class. As I mentioned, tomorrow we're going to get into some questions that I want you to ask yourself to really help you put those blinders on, to stop thinking about what everyone else is doing out there, so you can create a plan to do this that actually works for you. Thank you so much for hanging out here with me talking about this today. Again, drop those questions down in the comments and make sure to tune in tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time at 12 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you then.